Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of our NextGen Treasury series. Today's event is titled Protecting What Matters, Guarding Against Digital Threats. My name is Justin Boisvert. I'm a leader with BMO's Commercial Bank's Treasury and Payment Solutions team. I will be your moderator today. I've spent most of my career advising and serving customers when it comes to their financial operations. And I know that running an effective and safe financial operation isn't easy. And our clients really count on their BMO team to deliver advice, which helps them manage their cash flow, manage the cost of doing business, and to mitigate the risk of fraud. Our session today is all about that last piece, mitigating fraud risk. I don't know of a time when fraud wasn't a hot topic of conversation with our clients, but these days it really feels more relevant and important than ever. And today I'm thrilled to have two BMO experts who will share the latest schemes fraudsters are using, including artificial intelligence, and also will share some best practices around how you can protect your organization. With me today are Larry Zelvin, the Executive Vice President and Head of BMO Financial Crimes Unit, and Rebecca Tascona, Head of North American Treasury and Payment Solutions Product Management at BMO. Larry and Rebecca, thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited for our conversation today. I've prepared some questions for you, but we've also received some great ones from our audience, which we're going to weave into the discussion today. So thank you to our audience for your questions. But before we get started, Larry, we were chatting earlier, and you mentioned that AI deepfakes are one of the new tools that fraudsters are using. And when it comes to video calls like this, there's a really simple way that we can tell if the person on the other end of the call is real or if they're AI generated. That to me is incredibly scary, but here we are. This is our reality. So just to make sure I'm talking to real humans, could I ask both of you to please wave your hands in front of your faces? Okay, great. Thank you for indulging me that. I didn't notice any weird artifacts or strange video effects. So I'm feeling confident. I've got the real Larry and Rebecca with me today, so we can probably get started. Larry, let's start with you. How have you seen the fraud and cybercrime landscape evolve over the last 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, no, thanks, Justin. It's been getting worse and worse, almost by the minute, if not by the second. But if we can go back just a second and why we were waving our hands in front of our face,
Yeah.
folks, this is a technique that is right now seems to be rather effective to see if you're on video with somebody and whether or not it is an AI. Sometimes on the weaker AI stuff, you will see like images blur. It doesn't know how to handle the disruption because it's not a natural act. One of the other things you can try is that right now AI deepfakes have a lot of trouble with very complex words and phrases like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It really has difficulty as my mouth is moving, mimicking all that. One of the other things is you could ask a question that would make a human being go, wow, that's a really weird question. Like, Justin, if I asked you, what's your mother's maiden name and what day was she born and what year? You're like, well, Larry, that's an incredibly inappropriate question where AI would go, well, my mother was born on this day and any other question. So you want to do things that what a machine from an emotion standpoint can't keep up with or do things that it has difficulty mimicking. But back to your question, Justin, on how bad is the landscape, I will tell you just from my own personal experience and my family's experience, I must be deleting or reporting junk's email and junk phone calls at least 10 times a day. It is just nonstop. The numbers of fraud attempts by some experts are in the billions worldwide every single day. And this is all an attempt to either steal money from you or steal information that will allow them to steal money from you. It is relentless. It's becoming easier because of AI. The bar to enter the space has been lower, and you can do it at a far greater scale, and you can do it with far more credibility. So it's never been more important to understand what's going on and how to best defend. So I hope folks will take some of the things we've said already and some of the things we're yet to say to heart and better protect themselves and their families and their businesses.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, it's a really scary and interesting time that we've entered here with the rise of artificial intelligence. Rebecca, I want to ask you the same question. What trends are you and your team seeing recently when it comes to cybercrime and fraud?
Well, I just want to echo what Larry said, and thanks to everyone that's investing the time to keep on top of the latest information on this topic. So, just the fact that you're joining us in this conversation is really appreciated, and I hope you walk away with some very tangible things that you can apply right away. I would say that the main thing that we're seeing is that it's not just one type of fraud. It can happen in any payment type. So people often think, okay, wire fraud. Yes, but also check fraud, of course, ACH, EFT. We see it in any type of payment capability. If there's a way to pay someone or access funds, someone is trying to take advantage of that. And so, really, we just see calls all over the board about those types of frauds from different clients. And really, it could span different things around clients not realizing they're sending funds to the wrong beneficiary. So obviously making very sure that who you're sending to is who you intend to send it to, but also not monitoring activity and seeing that there's been activity that you have not authorized on your account. So it can really span, unfortunately, many areas. And it's a hard thing to grapple with when it's happened to you, but really trying to prevent it in the first place is really what we're hoping to provide you with some tips on today.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I do think it's interesting that, based on Larry's feedback, your feedback, we're kind of seeing this rise of more sophisticated tech-driven cybercrime, and also kind of a rise, or maybe return's the wrong word, but more traditional methods like check fraud, certainly haven't gone away. And I would imagine that these trends and what we're seeing kind of reflects the diverse criminal ecosystem that's out there, as well as some of the economic conditions and perhaps just the degree of accessibility that bad actors have to all these different types of methods, unfortunately. I can add from a relationship team perspective, Rebecca and Larry, we're also seeing, while clients are certainly leaning into digital payment methods like ACH, EFT, wires, card-based payments, we are seeing a rise in the instances of check fraud, and specifically examples which involve counterfeit checks as opposed to altered originals. So I do think it's an important distinction, because when fraud happens, how you respond is so important. And the recourse timelines to recover funds from the clearing bank when check fraud occurs is much shorter with counterfeit checks as opposed to an altered original. It's usually 24 hours. So from our client's perspective, I really think it can be challenging to reconcile their transactions and their operations daily. And I think this is a vulnerability for many businesses that are out there. Larry, kind of on that vein, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I think a lot of businesses, or many businesses, feel that they've taken the right steps to protect their business and their customers. But I'm not sure that's always the case, is it? What are your thoughts on some of the biggest gaps or vulnerabilities that exist today?
Look, there's no such thing as perfect security. And I often use the automobile example. I mean, back in my parents' day, I mean, seatbelts were kind of an annoyance. They didn't use them. They didn't see the need. Nowadays, our vehicles are much safer. You have airbags, and you have seatbelts that have to be worn. You get an alarm. The car is more fortified, if you will. But unfortunately, people still get seriously injured, or they can actually die. With security, look, you can take those kinds of precautions as just described from the car example. But I think, one of the most important things, and same thing goes with driving, is just being very well educated and really understanding the risks. And then, how are you addressing those risks? And it's ever changing. And you're like, well, look, I have a company, I have an organization. It is not a security organization, but unfortunately, in the world we live in, because of the internet and the worldwide access of this stuff, you are more vulnerable than probably in any other time in human history. Look, back in before the internet, you had to have proximity to do these crimes. You actually had to be at a site, and it was very hard to do multiple institutions because you had to have access and the time required in moving things out. Now you probably have millions of people every single day that wake up to commit fraud, and they can do it in an extraordinary scale. They can do it in an automated way, and they can do it in a highly convincing way. So despite all your best efforts, you still have the ability, you may still fail. And I think organizations and people need to plan for the times that those failures occur, because how are you going to respond? What are you going to do? So I can talk about a number of issues, and I think you're right. I mean, look at paper checks. What I say with paper checks is what's old is new again. But the fraudsters will change methodologies as we create new defenses, and we're really doing well against check fraud right now at BMO. But it's not perfect. But my gosh, over the last 6 months, we've made a lot of great progress. Instant payment systems are still a big favorite because it's instant. There is no recall, so the ability to use those ways to transact is always going to be a favorite. But look, I think there is some monitoring that you can do, both, but it can be burdensome. But you've got to assess that risk. And then when it does happen, as I said, who are you going to call? It's kind of like the Ghostbusters analogy. You need to have a very close relationship with your bankers. You should have perhaps code words with your bankers. So if there is a deep fake voice or a deep fake video, you have some sort of like, think about supercalifragilistic. You may just go, hey, what's our code word? You may just say Mary Poppins or Walt Disney, something along those lines that's not searchable, that's known to you all, but do know that once you use that password or that code word, that it has been compromised and you cannot use it again. So I think it is being on forums like this, doing your own education, making relationships with the people who can help you, like your bankers and other areas where you may do your transactions, and having those numbers ready and also have that trust relationship that you can rely upon is about the best you can do, and it can hopefully save you from a really bad day becoming a catastrophic day or something that is just really, really difficult to manage.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, that's it's interesting to have a password or a code or something with your banker, but it's it's kind of this theme of sometimes simple solutions are the best ones, right?
Well, Justin,
So I
if I
think
can
that's
offer before you move on, I'm actually
yeah.
in Montreal. I'm at the Bank of Montreal, and we went on a tour yesterday. I had my whole leadership team here, and there was an archivist here at the bank, and there was actually a BMO codebook. And there was 3 different categories, but they had an entire book devoted to codes at BMO in order to do secure communications. We may be going back to that.
Mhm. It's interesting. Yeah, I know certainly some of the trends more recently have been around authentication through biometrics, your face, your eyes, your voice. Some of the questions we've gotten from our audience today kind of put into question the reliance on phone calls. But I think, from BMO's perspective, it's all about the integrity of the information we have with our customers, and also, just kind of having a way to authenticate or know who's on the other end of the line, knowing your customer, knowing your banker. It's actually a really reliable way to authenticate from my perspective. Rebecca, from the perspective of vulnerability, are you seeing anything different in the market today, further to what Larry's kind of commented on?
Yes. So I think what Larry's describing is employees receiving instructions from something and wanting to make sure that that the instructions are coming from a reputable source or the actual person. And you can think about that in many ways. It could be a phone call, it could be written instructions coming through email, or other ways. And I think the thing that we're seeing that's making companies vulnerable is just speed. Everyone's so busy. They receive something in their inbox and they want to just get it out of the inbox, so they're acting on it. And really, I would say this is the area that companies need to remember they're their best first line of defense. So one thing we would really encourage is actually, this is the place you want friction. Slow it down. I use the analogy stop, drop, and roll. You know how we all know what that is, or many of us do. Think of what it is in this sense. Stop, call, verify. Read what you're receiving. Does the email address look different than what it normally is? Does the tone look different? Call back to make sure, to a trusted number. Don't use the number that's in that email. Call a different number that you have on file. Make sure it's actually instructions coming from your client. Often it's the CEO telling someone in the finance department to do something, but it's not really the CEO. So we always encourage that callback to verify. And that's going to, I think, be saving a lot of companies from accidentally sending payments in places that they don't really want to go. And think about your ecosystem, as Larry said, your suppliers. You send payments. fraudsters know that. And so it's not unusual for them to try to get a company to send payment to a different location, and they're pretending to be your supplier. So again, it really comes down to just being vigilant. And it's okay, actually, to not follow up on a request literally that next moment. Take some time to think about the request that's coming through and verify that it's actually the right person sending that request.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Rebecca. I love that message. I love the stop, call, verify slogan. I feel like we need to get some hats made or something with that on it. As catchy as it is, I do think it's a really effective tactic for both the bank and our clients. And it is something that we employ in our day-to-day operations, that we definitely have built into our processes to stop and to call back our clients. So it is really effective. I can think of an example from earlier this year from our client's perspective, where a fraudster had spoofed a client executive's email. They had requested an urgent wire, had a request to an employee requesting an urgent wire to a new vendor. I'm sure this is something most of our audience have heard of or perhaps experienced themselves, unfortunately. And I think when this happens, it can go one of two ways, right? The employee can react and they'll initiate the payment, and that can result in a financial loss. Or if the right controls are in place within the organization, you can stop the fraud in its tracks pretty effectively. And in this example that I'm talking about, this company, the finance team had a dual approval policy in place for wire transfers and also for wire templates for vendors, and a no exceptions rule even for executives. So beyond their online banking approval levels, they verified the request through a phone call to the executive, which thankfully revealed that this was a fraud that revealed the spoof. And of course, no funds were lost. And actually, when they kind of look back on what happened and some of the vulnerabilities in their system, it actually led to an improved email authentication protocol being put into place within the organization, which was obviously a great outcome. But it doesn't always happen this way. But I think this is a common scenario that highlights the importance of having the right controls and a playbook in place within your organization. So I wanted to share that. Larry, kind of continuing on this theme of best practices and kind of how BMO protects itself and our clients, are there any other best practices that you can recommend for our clients to consider within their own organizations?
Yeah, I think, look, hygiene from a cybersecurity point of view is imperative. If you are behind in updating your security aspects of your software, it is making you more vulnerable. It's not only for your operating system like Apple iOS, but also for the apps like the BMO BDB, OLBB, whatever you happen to be using. And that goes for all of your applications. So it is important if you start seeing those numbers, they are an indication on the app or on the operating system that you need to apply those patches and work through those vulnerabilities. I think it's also important that you continue to keep yourselves well aware of the threats. And we have bmo.com/security. If you go on the World Wide Web, and if you look up our site, we publish a number of articles and pieces, everything from how to talk to your kids about security to how do you talk to older folks about security. But we also put out the latest scams and give you tips on what to be on the lookout for. Be careful of QR codes. QR codes are being used more and more by bad actors because they know people will just click on anything, right? As soon as you get that bar, off you go. Nobody's checking the website. And in many cases, it's either downloading malicious software that can steal your information, or it is just a site that is asking you for your credit card number, your debit card number, personal identifiable information. But people are way too trusting on QR codes. And I'd say be very, very careful, or at least, as Rebecca said, slow down there. I think, one of the other, some of the other aspects is don't accept phone calls from people you don't know. There is a new feature on an Apple device where the AI will actually intercept those phone calls for you, but it takes all of about 2 to 3 seconds for AI to capture your voice and then use it credibly as a deep fake to call folks to pretend to be you. So you got to call and go, hello, you go, hello, can I help you? No, I'm good, thanks. That was enough to capture your voice. So you've got to be careful. I could go on and on, but hopefully those are some of the more recent techniques and some of the more some of the things that I think right now you need to be thinking about. But I'll turn it over to you and Rebecca for your insights.
Hey, Justin, can I share something that may be considered? I see that I'm getting cut off a bit, so I'm trying to. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna say a few things that are gonna sound so boring, but honestly, these are really critical things that think about if you have this in your organization, and if you don't have this rigor, like really encourage you to introduce it. One would be training. It's not enough to train your employees one time on fraud, how to prevent fraud, particularly if they're accountable for your payments. It's really imperative that that's something that's top of mind. So even consider like a quarterly training session, just reminding everyone about how to be vigilant, what to watch for. New employees, is this part of how you onboard new employees? If you're giving them access to the ability to have accountability to send payments, things like that, are you expecting that they're trained on rules to prevent fraud from the get-go? Because they really need to be if they're new employees. Who has access to your systems as well? Do you have strong access controls? So if an employee leaves your organization, are you scrubbing their access literally the next day or day of? Like making sure you have good hygiene around who has access to your controls, but also the training. And I know it's not the fun part of our jobs, but we have so many controls and documentation around how to do other parts of our role. This is equally important because it could really prevent a lot of headaches later on.
Yeah, really great points, Rebecca. And I think, listening to you both, I feel like one of the themes here is being proactive, right? And trying to get ahead of fraud. It can really be difficult to stop fraud or to recover once it's happened. And I think in addition to training, having a playbook, I think a big part of protecting your organization, protecting your employees, is to have a conversation with your bankers, right? There's a lot of great advice that our relationship managers, that our treasury and payment solution professionals can offer in terms of solutions, or the ways that you're using your existing solutions today in terms of different reporting and alerts, approval levels. There's all kinds of things that we can review with you. So we won't take the time to kind of get into all those details today, but that's really what your relationship teams are here to do, is to kind of take a customized lens to your organization to review what protections you have in place today, and how we can add additional value. So I definitely encourage our audience to lean into their BMO partners to help there.
One other thing, Justin, I forgot to mention is another just really good hygiene is just monitor what's going on in your account. We've had instances where clients reach out and they say, something happened 3 months ago, we just realized it, and so we need your help. And we really want to help, but I can assure you that if we had known about it, or if you had noticed it pretty soon when it happened, the next day, etc., the chances of being able to recover funds or prevent fraud are much higher. So making sure you stay vigilant on the activity that's going on in your account. And if you notice anything suspicious, that actually is when speed is our friend. So slow down when you're getting instructions and someone's asking you to pay something. But if you see anything suspicious, please let us know right away. That's how we can help the most.
Thanks, Rebecca. Larry, just one question. In thinking through the element of a playbook from our customer's lens, if a client discovers their environment has been compromised, there's been a fraudulent payment, are there a couple of must-do actions that you would recommend our clients to kind of build into their playbooks and to take action against immediately?
Yeah, I mean, call the financial institution where you have the transaction immediately. Rebecca is spot on. The sooner you can identify and report this, the sooner we can get on it and hopefully get it done. In some cases, like I said, instant payments, it's gone, but at least you can control, hopefully, that further problems may not occur, so the frauds don't continue to get worse. Even on the slower payments like checks, if it comes in 48, 72 hours, unfortunately, that may be too late. Same thing with wire. So you've got to, time is of the essence. I think reporting it to law enforcement, but do know when you report it to law enforcement, they may not take a lot of action. But I do think from a statistics point of view and an ability for all of us to understand the environment, I would still encourage. In Canada, you have the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, which is under RCMP. In the United States, you have the Federal Trade Commission. You have the FBI IC3. do make those reports, because I think it also helps help others from getting the same kind of fraud you did. In some cases, you may want to run an antivirus on your devices or across the organization just to make sure that there's not information stealing malware on your computers, on your devices. Again, you could change your password 15 times, but if a bad actor has access to your account, to your computer, none of that's going to matter. So running that antivirus is a really smart move. The other aspect is you may want to talk to counsel, talk to your lawyers to kind of look at what other legal means may be available to you depending on those frauds. In some cases, there may be some litigation along the way, hopefully not with us, but depending on, how these bad actors are working. But, and then the last thing I would mention is really make sure if you're in an organization, others know, because they rarely just hit one employee, they'll hit many. So I know it can be embarrassing. I know it can be frustrating, but look, sometimes your best defense are people with the knowledge and the ability to report. Sometimes those are the things that really are the biggest defense mechanisms you have.
Excellent. Thank you, Larry. I wanted to ask one question here, and it's one that we've received from our audience in advance, and it's around cybercrime insurance. Do either of you have any perspective on whether that's something that's important to our clients to have in place, or to kind of be part of their overall risk management strategy?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Look, cyber insurance has been around for a very long time. By that, I mean, more than a decade, at least in my experience. It really is a decision for each organization, as well as how much. There are some challenges around cyber insurance. So it's both a yin and a yang. I mean, the yin is that if you qualify and you meet the policies as it's stated, yes, you have that money available. Excuse me, but the problem becomes is a lot of insurers are making it really difficult to file a claim in which they'll reimburse. So if you do not have two-factor authentication, if you don't report within a certain timeline, there are a whole bunch of provisions. Make sure you understand fully the policy and the restrictions around it, because on the day you need it, it may not be available to you because you didn't really read the bottom line or really have the full understanding of what they will cover and what they won't. If you do get coverage, in some cases, insurance companies will go out to the lowest bidder as far as the remediation, particularly in cybersecurity. I've had many of our customers call and going, we've had these people on site for 2 to 3 days. It doesn't seem like they know what they're doing. They're not making any progress. What the heck is going on? And then I ask them if they had cyber insurance and have they activated it. The answer is many cases yes. And unfortunately, they're using somebody who's not very credible, and they weren't spending the money they needed. And now I had to give them advice on, here are the real experts you're going to need to call. And it is a lot more expensive. So those are just some views for people to consider, but it's basically know what you're buying, understand the limitations, make sure you understand the risks and the rewards, and then make your decision. But it's not a bad thing, but it's also not a no-brainer, because there are ways that this may not work out in ways that you had hoped.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, I believe with that, we've reached the end of our discussion today. Before we get into wrap up, any final thoughts, Larry or Rebecca?
I think we've hit on this theme a couple of times, but I just want to reiterate, with the advent of real-time payments, real-time payments are here now. And payments moving at an ever faster speed, we're doing everything we can to invest in our security, our fraud controls, but I really do want to reiterate that we really encourage clients to take advantage of some of the capabilities that their financial institution offers. Whether that's making sure that you have transaction limits set at the user or the account level, making sure that you're taking advantage of all the reports that are available so you can monitor activity, of course, dual approvers, things like that. Just make sure that you're taking advantage of the controls that exist within your own digital experience at your financial institution, so that you're as best defended as you could possibly be. The insurance conversation, as Larry mentioned, is a choice, but so is making sure you take advantage of all the controls that are offered to you. And it's really time well spent to get familiar with them, make sure your teams know about them, and then, of course, that ongoing employee training.
So I'd offer a couple of additional thoughts. First, I often tell folks, hopefully you go to see your doctor every year. Hopefully you see your dentist every year. Do you get a checkup in cybersecurity? And by that, I mean having an outside reputable provider come in and assess your security environment and look for areas to improve, not weaknesses, but areas to improve. I think you will find that to be very beneficial, right? So you can understand whether or not the controls you have are adequate to meet your needs and hopefully prevent frauds and other from really bad, potentially cyber things like ransomware or wiper or things of that nature. Second, I would look at your third parties, the information that you are providing them. Are they actually securing their networks and their systems? Can you actually trust the transactions you're making? Because these things are sometimes 2, 3, 4 times removed. So you need to have a good sense of, as you're moving money, the receiver, are they actually able to protect your investment? Do you have a sense of their security and how they handle things? I think it is really important, as I said, to have an understanding of when that bad day happens. Who are you going to call, and what happens if it happens in the middle of the night? What happens if it's on a weekend? So you've got to think through those contingencies and how you would react to it. And then finally, I would say is really, as Rebecca said a number of times, and I fully agree, you really need to educate people. Look, you can buy every security control in the world. You could have every security tool available. But at the end of the day, your best responder, your best detection is a human being that goes, geez, that doesn't seem right to me. This doesn't make sense. Do they have the ability to actually reach out to the people who can help them and then take action? So I would really encourage folks to continue to train, educate, and communicate, and then also understand what you're going to do when that bad day comes to you.
Yeah, and I know, Justin, you said we're at time, but if I could offer just another comment. It's okay to also have those same expectations of the counterparties that you work with, the suppliers that you work with. Ask them the tough questions about the controls that they have in place. Because we're an ecosystem, and obviously when one part of the ecosystem is vulnerable, that means like other areas could be as well. So it's really, I think, okay for companies to have heightened expectations of the third parties that they work with in this day and age, and wanting documentation and proof of what they're doing to continue to make sure that their environments and their controls are staying current. I think we mentioned it before, but the business email compromise, it could happen in any place. It could be your supplier who has no idea that their system has been infiltrated and someone's been able to access someone very senior in their organization's email and is sending emails out that looks like that individual and is giving your employees instructions like, oh, that invoice where you were going to pay it over here, we changed one of our GLs. Could you just send it over to here? And it just seems like it's just a simple ask. Again, you never really know who's on the other end of that type of request. So anytime that there's a request coming in where someone's asking your team member to do something that's different from what we've been doing, that's when you pause. That's when you stop, you call, you verify, just to make sure that those instructions are true instructions. And we can't reiterate that enough.
Thank you so much for adding that, Rebecca. Especially the comment around supply chain management, I think, is just so timely. In the current trade environment, we know a lot of clients are kind of evaluating supplier relationships. They may be taking on new supplier relationships. So having risk and fraud mitigation as part of your criteria when selecting a new supplier, I think is a really great best practice to call out. So thank you for that. And thank you both. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise today. This was a really valuable and insightful discussion. For me personally, today really highlights the rapidly changing fraud environment that we're in, including the role of AI in fraudulent schemes. But I think the theme here is really, there's good news in that we've come away with some tactics today and best practices to protect ourselves, to protect our organizations moving forward. Many of which are really rooted in common sense tactics, which is reassuring. To our audience, thank you for joining us today. I trust that you found today's discussion engaging and informative. Cyber fraud and risk management is truly everyone's business. Awareness is our first and best line of defense. I'll close with a couple of housekeeping items. As a follow-up to today's webinar, you will receive an email from BMO with a short survey about today's session. We'd love to hear your feedback. We use this to inform the direction of future sessions and make sure that they're engaging and valuable to you. This email will also include a letter which will include details for your CTP credits. Finally, we'll also be sharing a link to the webinar replay. I encourage you to share this with your networks, to pass it along to team members and colleagues who couldn't join us today. Thanks again for being part of this important conversation. Stay vigilant and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.